I want to welcome you. This is Yaya Diamond, and we have an amazing show for you today. I am so thankful to have my guest on the show. It's Miss Brenda Bradford Ward, and she has her book out. It's called 40 Years to Life. And I'm just so excited to have her here because she seems so cool. I mean, really cool. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so great to be here and to talk with you.
Awesome. So tell us about yourself a little bit because I mean, you seem like a cool person. I mean, like one of those people that you just want to hang out with and just like sit down and listen to all the stories.
Oh, please, please, please. Absolutely. And I can feel that way. I transitioned a couple decades ago, well, several decades ago. But I did not have that aspect to my personality when I was still pretending to be someone else.
Mm,
So the 40 years to life is actually that journey of suppressing my gender identity, really the person I was.
hmm
And it was reasonably successful in all aspects, except that it wasn't real.
hmm
There's this odd juxtaposition when transgendered people are affecting the gender assigned at birth. And so they have this sort of fantasy life where their actual real gender identity is shown only in private, the most private setting you can imagine.
Yeah.
Once we decide we're going to suppress that identity, it's weird. It's the real identity that we're hiding, and the fake thing that everybody thinks we are gets to be us, so to speak. So to have gone through college, to have gotten a master's degree, to have been president of a bank, all of these various things were about with somebody who didn't really exist. I loved my sisters, loved my parents, my grandparents, and they reciprocated. And it was just that they didn't really know me or love me, and they were utterly uh, surprised is too mild a word, uh, but they found it incredible that I really needed to go through transition. And incidentally, it was not something I chose. I found a competent, clinically competent psychiatrist who sort of specialized in addictions, sexual addictions, drug addictions, alcohol, whatever, but also in gender identity conflict. And every one of those words could not be more important. And then ultimately, if we're suppressing that identity, it's even worse. But when I found him, he said, actually, during the first session, that it was entirely possible that I was transgendered, and the ED means everything. If something is transgender, you can see it, hear it, perceive it. If somebody is transgendered, there is a gender identity conflict that they are suppressing. And they should in no instance ever self-diagnose. It may be expensive to see a clinical professional, and most entities have a government-sponsored mental health facility of some sort. Those people are probably swamped, but it is so important to get a professional diagnosis. And transgendered people, and again, that ED, those with true gender identity conflict, my puppy is over here drinking water. That's the racket in the background. But they don't really have a preference to be masculine male or feminine female. And they just want their conflicts to end.
Yeah.
And I this secret that I would not have told anyone before transition is something I'm willing to share with anybody and everyone.
hmm
But the state of Florida, for instance, has essentially outlawed treatment for transgendered kids And it's a little bit like saying, we're going to diagnose the fact that you have a broken arm, but you can't do anything about it for 10 years. Who in the world would do that? And yet, essentially, that's what Florida is trying to say. If you're transgender, don't seek meaningful care, continue to live with your broken arm, and maybe someday you'll have that fixed, repaired, whatever. And of course, it will never be as good as it would have been had the procedure been done earlier. Um, I need to come up for breath.
Well, I was going to ask you because you did say that, don't diagnose yourself. How about parents trying to diagnose their children? I mean, I went through a phase where, I was a tomboy and everything, and I could have been misconstrued as maybe transgender at that moment in time because I was like, I was all in for boy clothes, all in for what boys were doing, all in for it. But, as we get older, then we actually start to grow up and we decide when is it that you feel like the children need to have that intervention or that professional come in to actually say yay or nay or trying to get them to to see what's going on truly.
And I don't think there's a closer bond than a child to a parent, especially a mother.
Mhm.
But excuse me, it is no more reasonable. It's not a good idea for parents to try to make a diagnosis, for teachers, for pastors, if they don't really know what gender identity conflict is, if they don't really have a lot of experience with it, they they should realize that they need to seek professional help. Again, using that broken arm analogy, you don't want to go to a pediatrician, um, or a neurologist. If you have a broken arm, you go to an orthopedist and someone who knows bones and how to repair them. And actually knowing the bare bones, so to speak, of gender identity conflict is could not be more important. The facility in Britain, Tavistock, was helping some children transition, and I think on woefully inadequate understanding of the condition.
Mm.
And I think unless I really don't know how someone attains the professional competency that I'm advocating here, but the transgender condition itself is unlike anything else. It does not taste like chicken. Any of those odd comparisons. Um, the ability to walk into a store and not feel compelled to turn into the women's department when I was professing this masculine identity uh, was really a conscious effort. Um, I and I knew it was confusion of some sort, didn't know what it was. I wasn't completely ignorant of the details, but I was also kind of paranoid. If someone saw me going to a library and looking up transgendered, oh, they might discover my secret. They might wonder why I was in. I got my master's from West Virginia University. They had a huge library there, not just on the Evansdale campus, but downtown. The original university library was a huge building. And there has to have been all kinds of research available for me there. And then when I started working on a PhD in psychology, I found a wonderful online university and had no guilt whatsoever, because that was after transition. Had no guilt whatsoever in looking up more information about that. Um, I had suggested in a much earlier book that maybe functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRIs, might be a diagnostic that would work. And that was far earlier than the genome was mapped and we had CRISPR technology. And I think now that ultimately a DNA analysis that would only be done if there seemed to be good reason to do it. A
Mhm.
DNA analysis should show differences, fundamental differences between feminine and masculine orientation. Good. We've got 8 billion examples on the planet now. How large a sample do we need to actually being able to diagnose where there is and yes, there are births with ambiguous genitalia, and more often than not, there is an assignment made to female because it is easier surgically to do that than to indicate um, uh, than to try to rectify a masculine assignment. Um, and that may well be the origin for a lot of the female to male transitions, where they are actually originally male gender identities that have been converted somehow. That was the infamous case of Dr. John Money, professor emeritus from Johns Hopkins, who did the David Reimer case and actually built his thesis of gender fluidity on David Reimer, whose penis was burned irreparably. And the pain must have been unimaginable. And fortunately, most infants don't remember that sort of experience. But Money was insisting that he became David, but he was named Brenda, and he was supposed to live a female, feminine life, even to watch his mother and father having sexual intercourse, so he would know the role he was supposed to play. And David's brother was supposed to be participating in some of it's almost a Dr. Frankenstein kind of story. And David Reimer eventually did revert to his masculine identity, was married, but he committed suicide at an early age. So it's a very sad story. And I think Money is primarily an emeritus professor because of his defining gender identity and its being fixed within an early number of years. He thought it was maybe flexible for the first 2 years or so. And the Reimer case was the only thing he was really basing his research on. And it turned out to be horribly flawed.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
there was an earlier, most Americans were in the 30s, were familiar with Christine Jorgensen, who had her surgery in Europe. I think under Magnus Hirschfeld, and Harry Benjamin, who established the Harry Benjamin Standards of Care, studied with Magnus Hirschfeld and came back and helped establish those standards of care, which prevailed for the first, well, through the DSM-1 and 2, I think 3 as well. But mental health professionals began to have qualms about, some people pronounce that qualms. Anyway, about whether the transgendered condition was actually a mental health problem or issue or diagnostic impairment of some sort. Anything that would do to anyone's life what that did to mine, that has to be considered a huge impact on mental health. What happens to confidence? What happens to honor, integrity? Many of the values that we think are so important, especially if you're in a career of financial services, and yet you're pretending to be a masculine male, and eventually that's going to break down. We're going to have trouble with it. Ernest Hemingway's son, Gregory, attempted to transition to become Gloria Hemingway, but Gregory had been married and after transition, and I'm not sure that if it included surgery, but I think at the end of his life, her life, of Gloria's life, she wanted to revert to a life with a woman um, Gloria thought she loved, and apparently didn't consider the possibility of, well, maybe I'm a lesbian. And gender identity has nothing to do with partner preference. And preference is probably not the right word either, but uh, it's about who we are. On a desert island 1,000 miles from the nearest anyone, who are we? And that's really what the gender identity conflict is about. If we seem to be one thing and are actually the other, it is the harshest prison sentence anyone could receive. And it's largely self-imposed. We just keep this little genie in a box and let it burst out of its confinement every so often as a release of sorts, so that the true gender identity is shown, but we're only showing it to ourselves. I remember so many instances when I would be looking in a mirror with a wig and makeup and jewelry and whatever anyway, as though I were trying to see in the mirror who I was. So which was the reality, which was the reflection? Um, that's certainly not the best explanation, but it's the best I can do right now.
It's okay. I understand. It can't, I always said, I don't think anyone would want to go through what transgender people have gone through. And it's not necessarily a choice. It's more of an identity, right? So, but why would someone purposely want to go through such turmoil? Because it is turmoil. Because as a Black woman, I understand turmoil. If today I could change my skin color without penalty, without anybody, I think I would consider it because of the turmoil that I go through. But then the stigmatism of, oh, bleaching your skin and going, oh, she wants to be, that is not something that most people want to go through. I mean, that's not a choice. I mean, literally speaking, it's like, okay, I didn't like choose this, but this is who I am, and I can't change it. you know I can't change it. This is who I am. This is what I am. This is who I am. And I've always been fascinated by people who criticize other people for trying to live their own lives. This is your life. It's your life, not my life.
Yes,
You have to, you know what I mean? You have to go through your life like you want to go through your life. This is your decision to make. And it hurts me to see people put other people down for the decisions that they make for their own lives. It's not my life. I didn't go through that. I have my own issues. My own, so going through this and writing a book about this, how did that relieve you in a way, or did it?
I had already transitioned when I wrote 40 Years to Life, and I certainly knew what the tremendous relief of not playing that false identity was. Um, and incidentally, I can't imagine anyone seeing and talking to you and wanting you to be any other than who you are. Um, it, uh, what you were saying about how you grew up and the issues you encountered. I have two sisters, and I know that their lives were not cocoa, peaches, and cream, all wonderful, whatever, anyway. When they were going through public school, uh, girls can be so cruel to other girls, and it has nothing to do with who they really are. In many instances, they don't know. Abigail Schreier wrote Irreparable Harm, about some of the women going through what you were talking about, the tomboy confusion, whatever.
Mhm.
And some of those girls being diagnosed as transgendered and having irreparable harm done to them. So I could not agree more with Abigail Schreier. I certainly would not suggest in any instance that gender identity be assigned based on whether someone looked attractive or was short enough or thin enough or any other fabricated reason. The identity needs to be genuine, authentic, and it will be perceived that way. I suppose even under the worst botched kind of transition surgery. There's a wonderful story about Einar Wegner, who became Lily Elbe. As an artist, Wegner was wonderful, fantastic, but eventually became consumed with attempting to resolve, quote, quote, his gender identity conflict. And he died as a result of one of the surgeries that was supposed to help him through transition. And I think he probably would have said that if that had to be, that was fine with him, because he was not really Einar Wegner, he was actually Lily Elbe. Ebershoff wrote The Danish Girl. That's what the story was about. And it's a delightful film, had a wonderful actor playing the role of Einar Wegner and Lily Elbe. And I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but I'm taking that risk. It was a wonderful story. The actress Greta Garbo, the first of the actresses to be known as one name, not Cher, but Garbo. Garbo showed her acting chops, as they say, in a film called Queen Christina, made in the 30s. And I'm certain, as certain I could be without actually seeing the connection, but there must have been someone writing that screenplay who was familiar with the Lily Elbe story. And Garbo is being a tomboy, growing up to be the prince of her kingdom, and thinking that she has to play a male and perpetuate a masculine identity to actually lead her country. And she has an affair with a Russian ambassador, I believe he is. And Garbo does a fantastic job of the next morning seeming to see the world through new eyes. She really realizes at that point that there is nothing masculine or male about her. And she's not going to pretend to do that anymore.
That's wonderful.
It is. And there have been other attempts as well. There was a Roman emperor a couple thousand years ago, Elagabalus, who led his troops successfully in battle at age 14. Mm-hmm. Talk about accomplishment. But offered all of Rome, all of his kingdom, to anyone who could fashion a vagina in his body. The Roman historian that I need to look up, I'm not certain, it's in the references, said that Elagabalus could not even be a man, showing such contempt, not showing any of the objectivity we expect of our historians today. But that was a couple thousand years ago, essentially.
Yeah.
And so the condition has been around at least that
Oh,
long.
it's been around a long time.
It is.
Come on. Yeah, I mean, there's been so many different people who have, but okay, so I have to back up a little bit. Let's back up
Please.
just a little bit, because I love this subject, because, I'm not against anybody living their life. I know what I want to live. I know how I want to live it, and I live my life. And I don't want people to judge me because I live my life. You know what I mean? This was my decision.
Yeah.
As I got older, I understood who I was. And I understand that children have different phases that they go through. just like
Hmm.
adults have different phases, but we can't label the phases. We have to let that kind of play itself out. If a person gets older and they decide, I don't really, I think I'm pretending, I really don't like who I am, and this is not me, and I really want to just be me. It
Hmm.
happens whether your sexual preference is still the same or not. It's just who you are as a person and how you want to portray yourself to society. You know,
Hmm.
um, I think that most people don't understand that children are learning, and to deny them that access for mental stability or mental capabilities, or even to force upon them something that may just be a phase. Like you said, don't try to diagnose this.
Hmm.
Let it kind of get someone professional to help you, because it could, like me, what if I was diagnosed as a boy or a lesbian or transgender when I was going through my boy stage? I'm not a guy.
Horrible.
I don't feel that way. I feel like I'm a female. I'm a female in all sense of the world. I'm a female. But what if I was misdiagnosed? What if my mother went ahead and did that for me? That would have probably been a big mistake.
Oh,
And it
no,
would
no
have been,
doubt.
I would have, you know what I mean? So we see it, but you have to let it play itself out. You have to just kind of sit back and just let the person be a person.
And
And I don't know if you agree with that, but that's how I feel.
that was something a physician friend of mine was discussing my idea about a DNA diagnostic.
Mhm.
At least it would be something that could be shown and irrefutably, actually.
Right,
Uh,
'cause there are markers.
yes,
There are
and
markers, and most people don't know that. There are markers, and you
and
can't tell.
his very reasonable question was, well, what if we have that indication, but it's wrong? And my answer was, well, I don't think we would have done the test in the first place if we didn't have reason to suspect.
Right.
But having a DNA analysis that confirmed gender identity conflict could be so useful. And the earlier the diagnostic can be done, the better the mitigation might be, Florida law notwithstanding, at the current moment. Um, the governor of Florida is so well educated, and certainly from his military career, for all of the things he saw. Yet he and the state legislature in Florida don't really understand what the gender identity conflict situation is.
Well, it is truly a conflict. I mean, like I said,
Yes,
it's up to the person when they get older to decide. Maybe there is a marker, but maybe
yes,
that marker could be something that they decided against because they're more this way than that way.
yeah.
Let
I
the person decide for themselves. I don't understand, and I don't want to understand, and I understand that there might be a lot of comments in the comment section, and that's great, and everybody has their opinion, but ultimately you have to live your life the way you see fit. That is your life, your consequence, your life, your decision, and that's it. That's the way it works. That's it. That's how I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Ideally, though, and if it doesn't work out that way, in other words, if there has been this preponderance of influence throughout our youth and in the middle age, of all the people around us expecting us to be the male, masculine person they always thought we were, at some point we're going to say, no, that's not who I am. And with the professional competence of a psychiatrist with experience in the area telling me that indeed I was transgendered, he also said that I didn't have to do anything about it. I could just continue to pretend to be this masculine person
But
and
that's your
dressing
choice.
in secret. Who would do that? Who would
But
choose that?
again, that is your choice. They can't say, I can say that they can give you the choice. They can
Yes.
say you can continue to pretend if you want to. That is up to you. It is your choice. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. You don't have to.
And gender identity is such a fundamental part of who we are, whether we're right-handed, left-handed, uh, our eye color, any of those kinds of things that are kind of in the mix. Uh, there are things that we don't ultimately, being true to ourselves, we don't feel that we can continue affecting a personality being whatever anyway that is not authentic. And so for all of the help he was offering, maybe where it might be appropriate, it was certainly not appropriate in my case. I probably would not actually have seen him in the first place if I didn't consider the possibility that I was going to have to go through transition.
Right.
But I have never felt closer to my Heavenly Father than when I was struggling with how can I do this? And I can't say I actually heard. Um, I heard there was a phrase, "It will be all right." Those four simple words, and they were exactly what I needed. They were true, authentic. If I had been giving them to myself, as so many mental health professionals probably would suggest, it wasn't something I gave myself because it would not have had that effect. But I accepted that it would indeed be all right. And I was able to tell all the people I loved and who loved me that I wasn't that person I had pretended to be. I was Brenda, and I was going to live the rest of my life as Brenda. And um, I told my sister right after the surgery that I wondered if I had actually just created a bigger problem than I already had. But no, that that questioning was reasonable. The endocrinologist I was seeing actually diagnosed my dad's lymphoma. So my dad was hit uh, as hard as anyone could hit someone, not only with the idea that he was losing his son, but that he had cancer that indeed could be terminal. And dad and his family, I think, had a fundamental characteristic to themselves that they would prevail. They would quote quote soldier through. I'm sure there are people like that in your background. They must be in everyone's background. That so-called great narrowing, where supposedly everyone on the planet today is related to a 10,000 number population that went through what is called the Great Narrowing. Um, and those people have to have been resilient. Uh, but I do feel so sorry that my dad had to go through that. His battle with lymphoma was successful. He was cancer-free when he died. And I think as I continued to be his primary caregiver, I was as close to him as I ever had been. Some of the times when I visited my psychiatrist and was having electrolysis, he would go along so that I would not be alone in the car. Um, and there was no other reason for him to do that. Um, so I don't question whether he loved me. He might have wondered whether I could have not transitioned out of love for him. Um, the answer to that one has to be no. I had to be who I was.
Yeah.
There was that song years ago, "I Gotta Be Me."
That's right. You have to.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I don't think everything in our culture certainly should be taken from popular music.
No.
Wait, that would be crazy. Yeah,
That would
but
be.
uh, the transgender condition demands resolution, and however it comes out, we can't run away from conflicts. And wanted to say conflicts like that, but I don't think there are any other conflicts like that. Um, the horrible example that money chose, and that actually turned his hypothesis upside down and actually disproved the flexibility of gender identity, um, is maybe a hard lesson for mental health professionals to learn. But if they would inappropriately suggest that someone is transgendered when they're not, that's the kind of thing that Abigail Schreier was writing about, and the kind of tension, conflict you went through.
Yeah.
Um, I, you have to be very pleased with the woman you have turned out to be.
Yes. Yes, I
Eh,
am. And again, like I said, and like you said, uh, don't diagnose for yourself. Let I always say, let that play out. I knew that my auntie was gay.
Okay,
She was gay, gay. She was gay, gay, gay. She's always been gay. Nobody questioned that she was gay. She's passed, but nobody had a question that that woman was not gay.
okay.
You see what I'm saying? So it was like we knew, and that was fine. That was her life. That's what she chose. I loved my auntie with everything. She was my baby. You know what I mean? She was my
Yeah, yeah,
love.
yes.
It's got nothing to do with her personal decision to do whatever she wanted to do. That's what she wanted. That was her life.
Hmm.
She went through persecution, but how are you gonna live something like that's so depressing. I couldn't I can't imagine trying to live as a man knowing that my true identity is not a man. It's depressing. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I understand that plight. I understand that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like my auntie, she would have never been a female, a girly girl. Please, my aunt? You've got to
Yeah.
be kidding me. There's no way. No way. And I loved her. And we have to understand that there is a gene marker for this. There is a psychiatrist out there that can help you. But again, and I love what you said, don't self-diagnose and don't try to diagnose your children. Let them grow up a little bit because we all go through phases. Let them
Hmm.
grow up, let them get some professional help. Let it play out. Let's see what happens, and
Yes.
let them decide for themselves which direction they want to go in. You said earlier too that you don't know if there is a similar conflict, and I'm going to kind of combat you that there have been people in the music industry that were black that are now white. In the baseball industry that they were black and now they're white. And they're going through this whole thing too because their decision to bleach their skin and try to avoid the persecution of being a black person because it is hard. It's not easy. I this year 2023 I have been called the N-word I don't know how many times.
What?
So I'm telling you that as a black person I can't change my blackness. And if I did, then I'm a freak. You see where
You're
I'm coming
certainly
from?
you're certainly not authentic. Are you familiar with the South African plays The Blood Knot and Sizwe Bansi is Dead? Sizwe Bansi is Dead was um, about the central character making that choice,
Mhm.
either being the uh, segregated black person he was born as, or whether he would take this identity card, whatever it was, uh, and I, I've forgotten the playwright's name. Uh, wrote each of those, and I saw those in Pittsburgh years ago, Pittsburgh, PA. But they were asking that kind of question, whether he could stop, whether Sizwe Bansi would actually be dead in place of this new person he would be pretending to be,
Mm,
but could not authentically be.
right.
Um, And it's exactly the kind of question you're talking about there with the baseball players or whoever would change their identities.
Yeah,
Uh,
but it's their choice, and they're
well,
adults.
and they have to be fabricating their education, all of the experience that they had
Yeah.
as the real person they were to
Mhm.
pretend to be somebody else. And I think there's a kind of a fantasy that transgendered people have. They entertain maybe for some brief period during transition when they kind of assume that they would move hundreds of miles away and take on a new feminine appearance and uh, they would be, in that instance, they would be trying to transform their female feminine self, that was reality, into another fantasy. They had been pretending to be a male and masculine. Now they would be pretending to be female and feminine. And that, neither one is authentic, is
No.
reasonable. Uh, it would seem to me almost to be the quintessential acting job to
Yeah,
pretend to be something
that
for
you're
40
not.
plus years as I did,
Yeah.
um, and convincingly so. But there were times when I could not keep that little genie in its box. And ultimately, there was no way that genie was going to stay confined. So 40 Years to Life is about religious, political, philosophical, all kinds of considerations about the condition, and I had a lot of time to think about them. And every time I thought I was close to making a decision, I realized I might be entering a world where there already were plenty of female feminine folks out there. Um, and I would sort of not really be competing with them. I would want to join their club in sort of a sort. And there were experiences that I could not have, even as a transitioned female feminine character. Um, I could not suddenly have a uterus. I saw a story recently where someone professed to want a uterine implant of some sort so that that person could have an abortion.
An abortion? I thought it was a baby. No. Oh my
I,
gosh, no.
thank you. Yeah, exactly. My reaction, yeah, there are women who have had abortions. I don't think there are things that they chose to have
No.
from a really willing
No,
situation.
you don't will that. That's a hard decision to make.
Oh, there has never been divorce in my family, my mother or dad's family going back generations. And I don't know what that is, but separating oneself from one's infant, one's baby, wow,
It's a hard
that's,
decision. It's not easy.
and especially if women are forced into having the procedure in less than really sanitary conditions.
Yeah. Because that's what's going on right now.
Yeah,
That's what's going on right now. The abortions have not stopped. They've just transferred out of a safe environment.
I,
They're going back
I,
to the hangers and the coat hangers and the botched abortions and the backyard abortions it's terrible. It's terrible. Abortion has not stopped.
Um, I don't know how someone can consider themselves a part of a civilized society where they would permit an infant, however they the unwanted pregnancy, severe birth defects, yes, but where the infant is so brutally treated in most instances of and one can imagine uh, the procedure actually being botched in such a way that the infant actually is partially born. I certainly didn't want to. I don't know how we got into this, but it is really easy to talk
A
with you.
decision. It's a decision.
Yes.
It's a decision. And like you said, a gentleman that is transferred over and has transitioned to a female and now wants a uterus so that he can have an abortion. I don't understand that. I
Thank
mean,
you.
I'm a female, born a female, and decided to stay, in that female role. As I got older, I stayed in the female role because that's where I wanted to be, right?
Sure.
But I can't see myself making that decision as a woman who was born a woman with a uterus to try and see if I wanted to abort my child because I want experience. Um, uh, uh, oh, I can't. I just it's beyond me why
Yes.
someone would want to do such a criminal act. I think that's crime. That's a crime. Don't give that person a uterus just so they can kill a human being. That to me is a crime.
Amen. It certainly would seem so to me. That was my reaction entirely. But just getting back to the book, if I might, um,
Yeah,
it's I was attempting to show how there was no influence um, from my parents, my grandparents, my sisters, nothing along those lines that might have led me to be transgendered. Um, Nor was there any part of my education, I always loved music, and if everyone who loves music, by definition, is transgendered, we have far too many musicians. But
yeah,
and incidentally, I am a tenor. I went through puberty as a male, so I can't affect um, just with head tone only and weird kinds of things to interfere with my voice. The voice teacher I had dearly loved and studied with for about 15 years was very much about an authentic kind of production of the voice, something that we don't interfere, we don't manipulate. We
right,
actually try to get out of the way. And it's one of the wonderful things we can see in an infant or a dog or any other creature that produces sound naturally. And from the day we're born, I think from the day certainly we become self-aware, we understand our voice tends to be identified as us. And so maybe we want to influence it. We want to fool around with it a little bit. We want people to think they're hearing something else. But even that's, she was teaching authentic singing with a proper setup and using, well, setup, that kind of figurative speech she used throughout her teaching. Um, but the idea of a sound spinning and permeating uh, a room in which one might be singing. And that is indeed possible, although today so many people don't think in terms of singing past their microphone, which is kind of sad. Yeah, we don't learn bel canto, which was actually just beautiful singing. Some of the gimmicks and techniques, though, that Italians used were not to indict them. My goodness, they're the source for an awful lot of the most beautiful music we have. Um, but they're holding a candle and not wanting the candle to flicker, so that we're projecting a sound and not focusing it such a way that the candle will go out. Um, there and looking in a mirror and putting two fingers in your mouth, there are kinds of gimmicks that don't make you a good singer. Um, so I am a tenor with a naturally tenor voice, and I sort of got to accept that. I There isn't anything I can do as an alternative that would be authentic. And so, no, I don't want to sing about all of the girls I've loved before. That's not who I am. I haven't loved a lot of girls anyway, but so it's sacred music primarily, where um, And I don't think there's a better way, anything that takes our heart, soul, mind, and strength, the way singing and worship does. We worship him not because he needs our worship, but that's what we were made for. So we are pleasing him, but we're also answering a fundamental need we have to praise him, to worship him. I don't mean to try to turn this into a religious lecture. I'm not qualified, for one thing. But certainly in trying to show those things in the book, I'm saying that I could be, it was the only way actually, I could be an authentic person. It's who was the poet? Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood. I shall be
I don't know.
telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I could not travel both. And that has made all the difference. He delivered some part of that poem at John Kennedy's inauguration. If anybody remembers who John Kennedy was. Anyway, so there was nothing in my background that led me to be transgendered, nor was there anything I could do about it. When I learned to suppress the secret, I kept that secret for over 40 years. And I would not wish that on anyone. On the other hand, my life was not absolutely miserable from the first day. I think I had a strong, loving family. I would wish everyone had one like that. And certainly had still do have a strong Christian faith. It's a gift I would hope everyone would accept. And it really is that. There is far more than ample historical evidence that Christ lived and died the way he said he did. There may not be as much historical evidence for his having risen, and yet there are supposedly something like 500 people who saw him after he was crucified. So we can't really argue this time of year, especially, my goodness, to deny that gift, a gift like none other. Maybe that's my Christmas message, since we're close to Christmas. But it is so great talking with you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, we've run out of time right now, but we do have 40 Years to Life on Amazon. Am I correct? And where else can people find you?
It's Barnes and Noble and Books A Million also has the orange covered most recent edition.
Right.
The website is www.brendabradfordward.com. And there are a couple other interviews I had. I'm not sure there are any or is any that I liked more. I certainly enjoyed this talking with you.
Thank you.
And there's another website, I'm not sure it's up yet, BrendaBradfordBooks.com. So
Awesome.
again, it's such an unusual experience, and I truly lived it for 40 years. And I hope others don't have to do that.
Yeah.
There was an awful lot of wasted time and effort in there.
Definitely. Wow. Well, Brenda, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. I appreciate your honesty. And most of all, I appreciate that you are now living who you need to live. And it is your choice to do that. And I respect that. Thank you so much for being on the show. We have this book in the Amazon book club, as well as it is on Amazon. It's the orange cover. So 40 Years to Life is the orange cover, and the other one is no longer available. So if you do get a different color, please make sure to look for the orange cover. We're going to have all of that information in the description box so that it'll be easy for you guys to find that. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget to dare to be different. And until next time, guys, bye.
Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Instagram. Thank you for watching.